Welcome to UCF Imprint. I'm Alice Collier. Inspiring and humbling. Those are the words my guest uses to describe the profession of teaching. His experiences as a student, teacher, and a parent have caused him to write poetry. It's called Because I Care, prose about teaching. Joining me is UCF Associate Professor in the College of Education, Dr. Larry Hudson. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you, Alice.
So you're a closet poet, huh? You've come out of the closet with this book.
About a decade ago, I think I'm probably one of those mostly men who weren't
Has a sensitive side.
Has a sensitive side, weren't sure it was okay to write anything emotional. And because of things that happened in my life and the students I see, it just happened. So it does. It
came out of your soul.
It came out, and what's always happened to me is I get the last line. It's a very strange phenomena. Someone will say something to me, or it'll be an experience I observe, and I'll get a few key words, like 5 or 6 or 8 words, and I'll put that down. That's the title, or that's the last line, and then all I have to do is sit at the keyboard and fill in the top part, which takes sometimes 10 minutes. And then I'm generally done with it. I may edit a word or two in the next 10 minutes, and then I wash my hands of it and say, I wrote it, I'm done with it, it was for me, and if somebody likes it, okay, and if they don't, I do.
Now, have you given it to people?
Yeah, how it started was actually one-page pieces of prose or poems. And I did the one page mainly because I wasn't thinking of more than one page. It was a piece of paper. I wanted it large enough print. I wanted to say something and be done. I started with actually this one called Because I Care, which is the title of the book, but it was a story about a teacher who came to the house with her students. It was a culinary teacher. And I used to have my graduate students over to the house to meet them because they were at a distance, so I never saw them. So I only heard them on the telephone.
Well, explain to me why you don't see your students.
Because starting in 1984 in our program in education, we started using the telephone for teaching, which is not a new technology, but for UCF and Central Florida, it was pretty new back in '84, 21 years ago. And at BCC and other places, we would have just speakerphones, Radio Shack speakerphones. So I would only hear the students at a specific time. We used it with the graduate classes because there were small numbers at a variety of places. At any one location, very few people. People would call in from home or wherever in the country. So at the end, I wanted to meet them. I wanted to see them in person. So I'd invite them to the house. We'd have a big banner made, and I'd cater the food. Well, being in vocational education at the time, or technical education now, it seemed only right that I cater it with culinary arts students and a culinary arts teacher. So for one of the technical centers in Orange County, I hired the students. The teacher I couldn't hire, but I would pay for the food and pay the students, and they would come over in their culinary garb. It was kind of a marketing idea. Hats and all that. And we would make it a real formal deal.
Have this banquet.
It was and have this banquet, and I'd invite some administrators over, you know, and we'd have a vocational ed night, seeing that these are pretty excellent graduate students, and then marketing one of the programs. Well, one night I didn't know what to do for Betty Hendricks being the teacher, the culinary teacher. I wanted to give her a present, but I didn't know what it was. So about an hour, I remember exactly, they were supposed to be there at 4, about an hour before that, I said, I've got to do something for her. What am I going to do? I sat down at the computer and wrote the one-page poem about Betty. I told you these were emotional, but anyway, I wrote this about Betty and how she cared about her students. Because some of the students she had were living in the streets, and their life was being changed. So Betty, as a role model to them, and as a student of mine, she was improving her skills as a teacher, and I was learning about 2 steps or more away from my vantage point, the guts that her students had to change their lives. So when you asked me earlier, it was pretty odd, because when you asked me earlier which is easier to do, write them or read them, I think you just found out it's easier to write them.
Well, I want you to read them.
To read them.
Here, I'm going to hand you a Kleenex,
Yeah,
and I
okay.
want you to go. I'm going to take one, and I want you to go ahead and read us Because I Care.
Okay, doke. This is kind of how it all got started, because in education there are a lot of people who wonder about why you want to be a teacher, or who should be a teacher, or who shouldn't be a teacher. It's not always the case that people are advised to be teachers while they're in high school or ever. And I figured, being in vocational ed at the time, I really want the students to be very bright. If they're fixing my brakes, or doing wiring in my house, or cutting my hair, putting chemicals on my hair, I want them to be the best students they can be to do that. It's my body and my life, and when they fix their brakes, I want them to stop the car. So when we have students who in our program have the guts to go to college in their 30s, 50s, and 60s, they care. Okay, here it goes. Let's try it. I think you can imagine the scenario. When people ask me, "What do you do?" I answer without hesitation, "I teach." Sometimes they follow up with the why question, but more often they just look puzzled. So I volunteer an explanation. It is because I care, you see. But they don't see. They don't see the courage in students' eyes, the motivation in their hearts, or the success on their faces when it all comes together. You can see it if you look and understand that they are trying, really trying. You can see it when they succeed, maybe for the first time ever. But first, you have to care. Sometimes I even wonder out loud to myself, why do I teach? And the answer is always because I care. So this is a starter thing, starter prose. And when I see teachers who get up every day at 4:30 or 5 o'clock, and they're in the classroom awake at 7, I am amazed, because I'm not a morning person. I'm impressed at the energy level they can have year after year, day after day even, to do that. They're not doing it for any reason other than they care. I really think so.
Well, for you especially, this is more than a job. It's a calling.
Yeah,
This is your purpose. You know, nowadays people are running around trying to find their purpose, which I believe they should. But this is your purpose.
It seems to be, and it wasn't an initial plan in my life. I never thought about being a teacher. I was in the healthcare field for 15 years.
But were you happy in that field?
Actually, I had a great career. I
so
was
then what
really
happened?
good. What happened was I went to a technical school, got some training. I moved to Miami. I got a job. I had a career. My technical school called me back from Kentucky and said, "You want to be a teacher?" I said, "Oh, okay." I didn't have any training in teaching. I didn't have a bachelor's degree or any education course. But I was real good at my technical area. I was considered, an expert. So I moved back from Miami to Lexington and started teaching. And I'll do a quick story. My first day of teaching, because we had 40-hour week of teaching. On my first.
So now what were you teaching?
Respiratory therapy.
Okay.
Okay. And my class is not like you have now, 3 hours, something. It was like you meet 40 hours a week. Okay, I didn't know any better. What do I know? So I prepare for my first day of 8 hours. I had a lot of transparencies. And I found the classroom, and I carried them in there. Of course, there were probably copies of pages from books in very small print, but what do I know about graphics or anything? I carried them in there, and I started teaching. I had enough for 8 hours. I was done in 40 minutes. I turned around from the screen where I was projecting all the transparencies and finally looked at the students, not knowing anything about teaching. I'd never looked at them before.
Oops, forgot that.
Forgot the students. There's 10 or 15 people with my back turned to them going. So I said, "Are there any questions?" And I remember one gutsy lady in the back, a young girl, said, "I have a question." "What did you say?" Because I taught them all I knew. All I thought was very important for them to know the first day in 40 minutes. I had to call a recess, timeout, hall talk. I went out and had a little chat with myself and said, "I'm not sure if I'm ready to be a teacher." I didn't know what to do for the next 7 hours and 20 minutes of the first day.
You had said it all. And
I said it all
minutes.
because I was an expert. I knew the stuff, and I went right into it.
And you expected them to get it just like that, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
I expected them to get it. So what it did is it really humbles you. And at that time, I was in my 20s, and they were in their 20s, except one guy who was an old guy. He was like 35 or so. I couldn't quite figure out what this old man was doing in this class. I mean, I really at the time thought, he had a career. What is he doing? Changing careers. He's an insurance guy. What is he doing? Changing careers. My gosh, it's like it hit me with a sledgehammer. Not for very many, it took me many years, I think, to accept that that's a typical adult learner, not the 20-year-old that the rest of the class, or the 21-year-old that I was at the time. And now, those are the people I have in class. They're 35 to 55, 60 years old, going to college for the first time. They have so much courage. It's just a different ball game altogether.
It is a different ball game. And how would you describe the difference between somebody going to college at 18 and then going to college at 45?
That's a lot of courage. It's a lot of courage, motivation. The guts, I think of the guts they show every day in making the call to the university. And making the telephone call or sending an email and saying, "There's an emotion coming through here. I want to go to college." We have grandparents. We have a grandmother from Miami who finished last year, Maria Elena Hernandez. She finished her degree through our fully web-based program. She came up every semester to see orientation and to connect with us. We have grandparents all the time. I have a student this spring. You know how in Florida we like to say we want people to finish a 4-year degree in 4 years. I think that's a misnomer, and I'm sure there are legislators who will watch it. Well, yeah, but whatever. I have one in the spring of 2005 who's on the 20-year plan. But you know, he's finishing.
Aw. Bless his heart.
And I was saying that I haven't written a poem for yet because I don't know where it's going to go, but it's called Life Gets in the Way.
Yeah.
Because it does. And 20 years later, you've raised your kids, you've had a career, you've built a house, you've added on, you've done professional things.
And then you say, "What about me?"
What about you? And that's exactly what they say. Yeah. That's exactly what they say. They've done this for their family, for their kids. They more than once in the same semester, we have mom and child graduating with either the same a bachelor's degree or a bachelor's and master's degree, and they're maybe walking together, and woo, it's very tearful. It's very good.
I want you to read another. This is my favorite.
What a lead in
your book. I Walked Today.
Okay. Now, I want to say that there's a story. All these are true stories, so it's nothing that's fictitious. So, want me to tell you the story first or afterwards?
After.
Okay, no. That's probably better. When first asked, "Are you going to walk?" I answered quickly, "No, it's not a big deal." then I was asked again, "Are you walking?" My reply, I don't think so. It's not that important." A very special person in my life asked, "You are going to walk, aren't you?" And it really wasn't a question. This time I thought to myself, it is a big deal. It is important to me and those close to me. So I walked today with my head held high. I walked in graduation and received my diploma. And I'll walk. And I'll walk again and again, because success means I have to walk. And sometimes
let me tell you why this struck me.
Go ahead.
Because when you read the title, I Walk Today,
Yeah.
and then you start, you think, where are you walking to?
Yeah.
Are you walking to the parking lot? Are you walking, to school, to class? Where are you walking? And then you get to the end and you get it. The person is walking in their graduation.
Exactly.
And many of us have been there where we thought, oh, this is no big deal. So I went back and thought, oh my goodness, this is like me.
Uh-huh. Did you walk?
I walked.
How'd it feel?
Very good, but
Yeah.
after all these thoughts.
Yeah.
And so that's why this is my favorite. Now tell us the story behind this one.
This was an adult student in his mid-30s at the time, 2 young boys working full-time, paramedic. So a paramedic works 48 on, a fireman 48 off. Attending UCF before Webb, so he was in person with our classes, mostly when he could be there. Married, responsible person, did things with his children. And he wanted a bachelor's degree. His name is Rob Holborn. He's actually at Seminole Community College now. Rob finished his bachelor's degree, but because it was only a bachelor's degree, he wasn't sure he was going to walk. He just didn't. But you could see the same in a high school diploma. You could see the same in an associate degree.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what the diploma or degree is, or whether it's a certificate, or whether it's you walk across to get a prize from your employer. It's you walked.
It's a level of accomplishment.
That's right. It's the walk. And Rob said, I asked him, "Are you walking?" He said, "I don't think so. It's not that important." So Rob and I were doing a presentation in South Carolina, and his wife was with. So his wife and I had a little chat. So then it came to be a very special person in my life, his wife. We had a discussion. She asked him, only it really wasn't a question, "You are going to walk, aren't you?" So he thought about it, and he decided to walk. Well, it doesn't end there, because Rob finished his master's degree and his doctorate from UCF. And he's now at Seminole Community College in head of the paramedic program.
Larry,
So
when you give Rob and Betty these beautiful poems, what is their reaction?
It's that's very interesting, because how many times have you had a poem written about you?
Yeah.
So people are generally pretty well stunned that someone would be inspired by something they said or something they did. We have such great support for our students from our staff and from our people at our office, that an advisor who's over here named Cheryl Shagan wrote, just did something one day for one of our students, and I sat down at the computer and wrote a poem about her and sent it to her, and she just I said, "I'll be back in 10 minutes," and I sent it to her, and that's how that works. We've had
there's something different. I've had a student, because I taught someone something, and the student an adult sent me some poetry, and it's true, when something is written about you, there's something about seeing it in writing that really just resonates your whole being, that you think this person really cared. And you do. You do care. You do care tremendously about your students. They're very fortunate. Tell me this, was there a teacher in your life who made a difference?
Well, that's funny you asked that, because I got a letter from her last fall, 42 years ago. She was my high school teacher. I wrote a poem about her when I was in Mexico a couple years ago. While I was in Mexico, because she taught Spanish. And when you went into her room in high school, you crossed the threshold, you spoke Spanish. That was that. Whether you were any good or not.
Which is the best way to learn a foreign language.
Totally immersed you in the language.
Yeah.
She would, this is Iowa in the 60s, fairly white up there. She would take us to civil rights dinners. She would drive. She was not a good driver, so we always kissed the ground when we got back home. That was 42 years ago. She would take us to migrant families, because there's a Heinz tomato ketchup factory in town. She would take us to migrant families' houses for dinner in Spanish, and we'd eat Spanish Mexican food because they were laborers following the crops. She was involved in the United Nations, UNICEF. I'm out there selling UNICEF things at grocery stores. She's out there changing the world. She's still changing the world. So the poem I wrote, which I don't necessarily want to read, but it's just called "It's Miss Miller's Fault." It's because it's your fault. This is the way I am, and you did it, and it's a good thing. So thank you, Miss Miller.
What do you say to young teachers just starting out?
If I had a young teacher, that would be a different story. Well, what do I say to teachers starting out?
Yeah.
I'm really glad you picked teaching. You're going to enjoy it. And if you stop enjoying it, would you please leave? I want you to get up every morning and want to go into work. I want you to enjoy the time you have. I want you to change lives. And they do, they change lives. Sometimes you change lives by a comment that you don't even think about, or an action that you wouldn't even consider important. And then 10 years later or 2 decades later, you get a letter, or you get I wrote a poem called Pride Wall. It was inspired by a teacher in the corrections institution who got letters from inmates who were out, they were graduating, they were out working, about all the good things that happened. And he put them on his pride wall. It was a sense of pride that these graduates, these completers, these successes in life back in the community recognize what that teacher did.
I want you to read one other.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have one of your favorites?
Yeah, I do, because yeah, I do.
The book is full of several, so it's hard to choose.
Yeah, this is also in the book, but this was inspired by an automotive instructor at Brevard Community College in about the last day of getting accepted for graduation. I was not his advisor, but I'm the red tape cutter sometimes. Glenn Forrester over here, he called me and said, "Help. I don't think I'm going to graduate because it doesn't show something on my BCC audit." So this is called One Starfish at a Time. Do you remember? A starfish gets washed up on the beach, stranded, with no means of getting back to the sea except by tide or accident. We all know this story. And that's where people reading this go, "Oh, I've read this one before, I don't need to go on." The same is true of students. Goals are identified, and life founders them. They become stranded on the beach or stuck on a sandbar with no apparent way of achieving their goals and improving their lives. They can't get back to sea. there is no returning tide and no accident. There is only you and me. That's why I have to help, and so do you. It is important to each person. We can't afford to leave them stranded on the beach. It makes a difference to the starfish, you know. That's what teachers are, really. Starfish savers. So I'll be here on the beach waiting and just picking them up and carrying them back to sea, one starfish at a time. Is that okay?
Wow, over the course of you've been doing this how many years? Since you first went into that room with your first class?
No, I think actually I probably been maybe a dozen years that I started
What
writing.
a difference, huh? What a difference from the time you first walked into that classroom.
Oh, yeah. Going, whoa, old people here.
Because then it was like a class, one class. Now it's a classroom of individuals.
It's individuals, and our program being fully web-based, we have students from all over the state, outside the state, and a few outside the country. We still feel very connected to them, and our personalities come through online. Sometimes I'll write a poem and I'll just send it out to them as a class, and it resonates with some, and the connection is there.
I'm sure.
You know, it's kind of amazing.
Tell me this, you gave me this bell as a gift.
Yes.
What does this symbolize? And it's loud.
Being in Florida with the oldest wooden schoolhouse in St. Augustine, it seemed an appropriate token of appreciation that we have this. When I was a very little child in a rural area, I lived for a month across from a one-room schoolhouse, and I remember going there, and my mother says, "You never went there." But I seem to have a contact in some other life, maybe, with being in a one-room schoolhouse, and so it's been something we started doing. Is we just do school bells, and it's about learning, it's about teaching. But
every time I look at this, I'm going to think about you and what a remarkable, remarkable teacher you are.
You're too kind. Thank you.
You keep making a difference,
Thank
and you
you.
will change the world. Again, the book is called Because I Care. Prose about teaching. That's our program for now. Thanks so much for watching UCF in Print. Until next time, I'm Alice Collier. Goodbye.